Chapter 11. The sheriff was in his office when I came into the courthouse. I could see him behind his desk, talking to another man who had just opened the door to leave. They talked a while longer, then the man came out into the corridor. I caught the door and went into the office with the bag of food. "Help you?" Guidry asked me. He sat with his cowboy boots propped up on the desk. He wore an open-collar light gray shirt and dark gray pants. His necktie, his cowboy hat, and his coat hung on a rack by the file cabinet next to his desk. This was the first time he had been in his office since I started coming up there, but I didn't doubt that he knew who I was. "I came to see Jefferson," I said. "How y'all getting along?" "This will be my first time alone with him." "What's in the basket?" "Food his Nannin sends him." "Paul?" Guidry called, while still looking at me. The young deputy came into the office from a side door. "Called, Sheriff?" Guidry nodded toward me. "How you doing?" the deputy asked. "Fine, and yourself?" "I can't complain," he said. We went through the usual routine. I had to take everything out of my pockets and put it all back. The deputy went through all the food, unwrapping one piece of chicken, checking it, putting it back. He unwrapped 2 or 3 pieces of candy, checked out the bag of sweet potatoes, then, finished, he wiped his hands on a pocket handkerchief. "Still think you can get something into that head of his?" Guidry spoke across the tips of those cowboy boots. "I don't know, sir." "Just remember what I said," Guidry said. "Any sign of aggravation, I'll stop all this." I nodded my head. Then I remembered that I had to speak out. "Yes, sir." He looked at me a while, then he nodded to the deputy, and we left the office. Since Miss Emma was not with us this time, I walked beside the deputy instead of behind him. We went by all the familiar opened doors where people pecked on typewriters. We climbed the familiar stairs up to the big steel door that led onto the cell block. By now, I could probably have done this with my eyes shut. The prisoners came to the cell doors as before. If they were not the same ones, they were the same ages, in their late teens or early 20s. I gave them the change I had. Nobody got more than a dime. 2 could put their money together and get a pack of cigarettes, or 1 could get a pack of gum and a candy bar. Jefferson sat on his bunk with his head bowed and his arms hanging down between his legs. The deputy opened the door for me to go in, and he reminded me that he would be back within the hour. In case I wanted to leave before then, I could call a trustee, and the trustee would come to get him. "Jefferson?" I said. He didn't look up. "Your Nannin couldn't make it today," I said. "She has a bad cold, but she sent you something. How are you feeling, Jefferson?" After a while, he raised his head, but he didn't look at me. He looked at the barred window. From the cell, all you could see were the yellow leaves on the sycamore tree and the pale blue sky between the leaves. "You hungry?" I asked. "You brought some corn?" he said. "Corn? That's what hogs eat," he said, turning his head now to look at me. He had not washed his face or combed his hair for days. He wore one of my old khaki shirts and a wrinkled pair of brown pants. He didn't have on shoes. They were stuck under the bunk. "I didn't bring any corn," I said, "and you're not a hog." He looked at me as if I was patronizing him. "When was the last time you ate?" I asked him. "I don't know." "Today?" I asked him. "I don't know." He was playing with me, and I knew it. "Some chicken in there," I said. "Biscuits and sweet potatoes. Even some candy she made. You ought to try it. It'll make her happy." "Hogs don't eat no candy," he said. "You're not a hog," I said. "You're a man." He grunted deep in his throat and grinned at me. "Mind if I have a piece of your chicken?" I asked him. "I left before dinner." He acted as though he had not heard me. Since the deputy had already gone through the paper bag, I didn't have to do too much unwrapping to get to the food. I took out a drumstick and a biscuit and started eating. "Your Nannin can sure cook," I said. "That's for humans," he said. "You're a human being, Jefferson," I said. "I'm a old hog," he said. "Humans don't stay in no stall like this. I'm a old hog they fattening up to kill." "That would hurt your nannin if she heard you say that. You want me to tell her you said that?" "Old hog don't care what people say." "She cares," I said. "And I do too, Jefferson." "Y'all humans," he said. "You're a human being too, Jefferson." "I'm a old hog," he said, more to himself than to me. "Just a old hog they fattening up to kill for Christmas." "You're a human being, Jefferson. You're a man." He kept his eyes on me as he got up from the bunk. "I'm going to show you how old hog eat," he said. He knelt down on the floor and put his head inside the bag and started eating without using his hands. He even sounded like a hog. I stood back watching him, while I continued to eat the biscuit and piece of chicken. "That's how old hog eat," he said, raising his head and grinning at me. He got up from his knees and went back to his bunk. "That's how old hog eat." "All right," I said. "But when I go back, I'm going to tell her that you and I sat on the bunk and ate, and you said how good the food was. I won't tell her what you did. She is already sick, and that would kill her. So I'm going to lie. I'm going to tell her how much you liked the food, especially the pralines." He said nothing. He just grinned at me. "Are you trying to hurt me, Jefferson?" I asked him. "Are you trying to make me feel guilty for your being here? You don't want me to come back here anymore?" His expression didn't change, as though someone had chiseled that painful, cynical grin on his face. "That man out there doesn't want me up here either," I told him. "He said I will never be able to make you understand anything. He said I'm just wasting my time coming up here now. But your nannin doesn't think so. She wants me to come up here. She wants us to talk." "What do you want?" "You want me to stay away and let him win? The white man? You want him to win?" His expression remained the same, cynical, defiant, painful. I could not think of anything else to say to him, but since I had been there less than half an hour, I knew it was too early to call for the deputy. The sheriff would have known that Jefferson and I were not getting along, and that was the last thing I could afford, at least for Miss Emma's sake. The rest of the hour just dragged along. Jefferson was not looking at me anymore. He had lain back down on the bunk, facing the wall. I gazed out the window at the yellow leaves on the sycamore tree. The leaves were as still as if they were painted there. Between the leaves I could see bits of pale blue sky. I looked at Jefferson with his back to me. I looked at his pair of laceless shoes under the bunk. I looked down at the bag of food, trying to remember how many pieces of chicken, biscuits, potatoes, or pieces of candy were still in there. I went to the wash bowl and got a handful of water to drink. I tried turning the faucet off completely, but it continued to drip. The water had left a brown stain from the top of the bowl to the drain. I turned to Jefferson again. He was facing the wall, his back to me. I wanted to ask him what he was thinking about. When I heard the deputy come down the cell block, I went to the bunk. "Anything you want me to tell your nannin?" I asked him. He didn't answer. His eyes were open and staring at the wall. "I'll tell her how much you enjoyed the food," I said. "That would make her happy." The deputy came up to the cell and let me out. "Y'all doing all right?" he asked as we walked away. "He was glad to get some home cooking," I said. "I can't blame him for that," the deputy said. Chapter 12. I knew Miss Emma expected me to come back and tell her all about Jefferson, but I had not thought of a good lie yet. I couldn't go there and tell her what had really happened. That would have hurt too much. I couldn't go there and say that we had had a good talk. She probably wouldn't have believed it, not after the way he had acted when we were there together. I needed time to think of something. Not a big lie, just a little lie, or a number of little lies, but a lie it had to be. Maybe I could tell her he was concerned about her health. She would like that. Maybe I could tell her he had begun to use the brush and comb I had bought for him. Or maybe I could say that the deputy had told me what a good prisoner he was, and that the sheriff himself had said he was a good boy. I needed time Time to get my lies straight. And the best place for that was the Rainbow. I got into my car and drove back of town. The Rainbow Club was quiet, dark and quiet. There were only 2 old men in the place besides Joe Claiborne, who was behind the bar. All 3 stood talking baseball. Jackie Robinson. Robinson had just finished his 2nd year with the Brooklyn Dodgers. "What's happening, Prof?" Claiborne said to me. "Ajax," I said. He brought the bottle of beer to me. "Little business in town," I said. Claiborne could see that I didn't want to talk about the business, or maybe he realized what the business was. He nodded his head and went back down the bar where the other customers were. The 2 old men continued their conversation, and Claiborne joined them again as if he had never left. From where I stood, about halfway down the bar, all I could hear was Jackie this and Jackie that. Nothing about any of the other players, nothing about the Brooklyn Dodgers as a team. Only Jackie. Jackie this and Jackie that. I sipped my beer slowly while listening to them, and they were very good. They could recall everything Jackie had done in the past 2 years. They remembered when he got his first hit and who it was against. They remembered the first time he stole 2 bases in one game and the first time he stole home. One of the men backed away from the bar to demonstrate how slow the pitcher was in throwing the ball, which gave Jackie the opportunity to steal home plate. The old man looked over each shoulder, as pitchers do when there are runners on bases. He raised his leg as high as he could, which was only about a foot off the floor, to show how much time the pitcher took to throw the ball to the plate. While the pitcher went through the motion of raising his leg and winding his arm, Jackie was on his way home. Now the old man became Jackie, not running, but showing the motion of someone running at full speed. His arms were doing what the legs could not do. He showed you the motion of Jackie sliding into the plate, the motion of the umpire calling Jackie safe, and the motion of Jackie brushing off his clothes and going into the dugout. The old man nodded his head emphatically, with great pride, and went back to the bar. Claiborne and the other old man told him that he was exactly right. Listening to them, I could remember back to the time before Jackie came to the major leagues, when it was Joe Louis that everyone talked about. Yes, I could remember. I could remember when he was the only one. Especially the big fight with Schmeling, that German. I could still remember how depressed everyone was after Joe had lost the first fight with Schmeling. For weeks it was like that. To be caught laughing for any reason seemed like a sin. This was a period of mourning. What else in the world was there to be proud of if Joe had lost? Even the preacher got into it. Let us wait, children. David will meet Goliath again. And everyone told everyone else, they gon' meet again. Just wait. And we waited and waited. And finally the big fight did come. There were 2 radios in the quarter, one at the Williams' house, down the quarter, another at the McVeigh's, up the quarter. I was down the quarter. I was 17 then. I was not the youngest, nor, surely, the oldest. I was just one, praying and hoping for the only hero we knew. There was much noise, much talking, while the people waited for the fight to begin. Once the announcer said that the fighters were in the ring, everyone became silent without anybody having to tell them to do so. There were small children there too, but even they had quit playing and were silent. We held our breath, remembering the first fight. Could God let it happen again? Would He let it happen again? Then it was over, and there was nothing but chaos. People screamed. Some shot pistols in the air. There were mock fights. Old men fell down on the floor, as Schmeling did, and had to be helped up. Everybody laughed. Everybody patted everybody else on the back. For days after that fight, for weeks, we held our heads higher than any people on earth had ever done for any reason. I was only 17 then, but I could remember it, every bit of it. The warm evening, the people, the noise, the pride I saw in those faces. Now, while I stood there listening to the old men in their praise of Jackie Robinson, I remembered something else. The little Irishman. I was at the university then. The little Irishman was giving a series of lectures at white universities, but some way or another, our university got him to visit us. How? Only God knows. But we were all gathered in the auditorium, and there stood this little white man with a thick accent, talking to us about Irish literature. He spoke of Yeats, O'Casey, Joyce, names I had never heard before. I sat there listening, trying to remember everything he said, and a name he repeated over and over was Parnell. And he told us how some Irishmen would weep this day at the mention of the name Parnell. 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 Then he spoke of James Joyce. He told about Joyce's family, his religion, his education, his writing. He spoke of a book called Dubliners, and a story in the book titled Ivy Day in the Committee Room. Regardless of race, regardless of class, that story was universal, he said. For days after the lecture, I tried to find that book, but it was not in our library and not in any of the bookstores. I went to Mr. Anderson, my literature teacher, and asked him if he knew how I could get a copy. He said he would see what he could do. A week later, he kept me after class and handed me a collection of stories. It was not Joyce's Dubliners, but an anthology of short stories with Ivy Day in the Committee Room included as one of them. Mr. Anderson had gotten a professor at the white university to check the book out of his library for him. He's a pretty decent fellow, Mr. Anderson said about the white professor. Some of them are, you know, and always remember that. Now take care of that book. You can keep it a week, and it had better come back to me in the same condition in which it left. You do understand me, don't you, Wiggins? I read the story and reread the story, but I still could not find the universality that the little Irishman had spoken of. All I saw in the story was some Irishmen meeting in a room and talking politics. What had that to do with America, especially with my people? It was not until years later that I saw what he meant. I had gone to bars, to barber shops, I had stood on street corners, and I had gone to many suppers there in the quarter. But I had never really listened to what was being said. Then I began to listen closely to how they talked about their heroes, how they talked about the dead, and about how great the dead had once been. I heard it everywhere. The old men down at the end of the bar were still talking about Jackie Robinson. But I was not thinking about Jackie now, or Joe Louis, or the little Irishman. I was thinking about that cold, depressing cell uptown. I raised my hand for Claiborne to bring me another beer. He gave me the bottle and looked into my eyes, and he could tell that I didn't feel like talking. So he went back down the bar to where the old men were still talking baseball. I didn't want to think about that cell uptown. I didn't even want to think about Miss Emma and the lies I had to tell her. I wanted to think about more pleasant things. I thought about Vivian. Now there was not a more pleasant thing in the world to think about. Today was Friday, wasn't it? And wouldn't it be nice if the two of us could go somewhere and spend the entire weekend? Wouldn't that be nice? I would be able to forget the whole thing for at least a couple of days. Damn it. It would be so good if we could go away and never come back. I knew I could find a job doing something else, and so could she. If we could just get the hell away from here. Just go away. The old men down the bar continued to hit the ball, throw the ball, and slide into bases. And my mind went back to that cell uptown, then to another cell, somewhere in Florida. After reading about the execution there, I had dreamed about it over and over and over. As vividly as if I were there, I had seen that cell, heard that boy crying while being dragged to that chair. "Please, Joe Louis, help me. Please, help me. Help me." And after he had been strapped in the chair, the man who wrote the story could still hear him cry, "Mr. Joe Louis, help me. Mr. Joe Louis, help me." And down the bar the old men went on hitting the ball, running the bases, and sliding home. And I wondered if the one in that cell uptown would call on Jackie Robinson as the other one had called on Joe Louis. "Taking off, Prof?" Claiborne asked me. "I have to find my lady," I said. "Take it easy, Prof." I waved my hand to the old men. They nodded to me. The school was 3 or 4 blocks away, on the main street, but everything back here was pretty close to everything else. The school was on the same street as the Catholic church, the movie theater, the mortuary, a cafe, and the ice cream parlor. The grocery store was not far from the church, but on another street. The barber shop and the gas station weren't too far from the mortuary. Everybody knew everybody. Everybody knew everybody else's business. I parked in front of the movie theater and watched one of the teachers direct the children onto the school bus. When the bus drove away, I got out of my car. "What's happening, handsome?" the teacher said. "What's going on, Peggy?" "Thank God it's Friday," she said. "She's still inside." "Having a drink later?" "A couple," Peggy said. As we walked up to the entrance of the school, I saw 2 boys taking in the flag. Peggy told me she would see us at the club later, and I went to Vivian's classroom. The school had only 5 rooms, and in some the classes were doubled. Vivian taught the 6th and 7th grades. The children had all gone, and she sat behind her desk looking over papers. She wore a brown woolen suit and a white blouse. She didn't raise her head until I was near the desk. Then she smiled. She had the most beautiful and most even teeth I had ever seen, but I thought every bit of her was perfect. "What are you doing here?" she asked. "You ever known a Friday I could stay away from you?" I went around the desk and kissed her. "Last boy sit at this desk wouldn't dare do that," she said. "I better not ever catch anyone else doing it," I said. "What are you doing here?" she asked. "To see you, what else?" She looked up at me, and she could read my face, and she knew I had been at the jail. "Still working?" I asked. "Nothing I can't do later." I saw Peggy. They were going over for a drink. "Sounds like a good idea," Vivian said. She put some papers into her briefcase and stood up. "I have to see the principal before she leaves. Do you know how to clean a blackboard?" "I've done a few." "If you do a good job, I'll give you an apple," she said. "Thanks, teacher." She kissed me lightly on the lips and walked away. At the door, she looked back and smiled again. A vertical line had been drawn down the blackboard. On one side of the line were French sentences, on the other side English translations. They were simple sentences. Where is the book? Where is the tablet? Where is the pencil? I wiped both halves clean, but you could still see the imprint of the sentences. I drew another vertical line, and on one side I wrote, "Je t'aime, je t'aime, je t'aime." And on the other side I wrote, "I love you, I love you, I love you." Vivian came back into the room and saw what I had done. "You naughty boy," she said. "Suppose Daisy sees that." "Doesn't she already know?" "I ought to make you stand in the corner on one foot. If you stood there with me, I wouldn't mind." "Naughty, naughty boy," she said. "Erase that." "Only if you kiss me first." She had picked up the briefcase, and I took it from her and laid it on the desk, and I pulled her into my arms. "Let's go somewhere. Just the 2 of us," I said, after kissing her. "Let's go somewhere and spend the night. Baton Rouge, New Orleans, anywhere." "My babies," she said. "Dora will look after them. Come on, let's go somewhere." "We're having a drink with Peggy, remember? Let's forget Peggy and everybody else. Let's go somewhere." I could see that for a moment she was thinking about it. Then she shook her head. "No," she said. "I can't take that chance." "Don't you want to?" "More than anything." "Then let's take the chance." "No," she said. "I can't give him an excuse to take my babies." "You think he would?" "I don't know. I can't take that risk." "I hate going to Robert and Helen's and then leaving in the middle of the night." "I hate it too," she said. "But staying overnight somewhere, I can't take that chance." "Where is he now?" "Last I heard, in Houston." "When's he coming back?" "I don't know." "Until he makes up his mind, we just do nothing." "I thought we did a lot." "You know what I mean." "Come on, let's go find Peggy and them and have a drink." "Not until I get another kiss." "What is the matter?" she said, after we had kissed. Maybe it was the way I had held her. Maybe it was the look in my face. I told her what had happened at the jail, how Jefferson had gotten down on his knees to eat the food out of the paper bag. I saw her frown, and she brought her hand up to her mouth. I have to go back to that old woman. But I couldn't go back then. I couldn't face her then. I needed some time to think of a lie to tell her. With her hand still over her mouth, Vivian was looking at me. I wish I could just run away from this place. Vivian shook her head. You know you can't. Why not? For the same reason you haven't done it yet. I've wanted to, but you haven't. Why? You know the answer yourself, Grant. You love them more than you hate this place. Is it love or cowardice? Afraid to take a chance out there? You have your folks in California. You can always go to them. I have thought about it many times. Sure, she said. You even did it once, but you came back. This is all we have, Grant. I want more. I turned away from her and erased the blackboard. Well, let's go have that drink, I said. Wait, Vivian said. She went up to the board and wrote in large letters, Je t'aimerai toujours, je t'aimerai toujours, je t'aimerai toujours. And suppose old Daisy comes in here before you get back on Monday. She already knows about it, Vivian said. So do all the rest, teachers and students. Chapter 13. Not long after the second bell rang at the church, I heard Miss Eloise Bowie out in the road calling my aunt. I went onto the porch and told her that my aunt was in the back. Miss Eloise, tall and thin, stood in the road, leaning on her bamboo walking stick. She wore a long black overcoat and a black hat with a white band. She was looking up the quarter. She said she thought there was a new chill in the air, and I agreed with her. While she waited for my aunt, she continued to look up the quarter, toward the church. I didn't feel like standing out on the porch, but I thought it would be rude to go inside and leave her in the road with no one to talk to. I heard my aunt come into the house from the backyard. She was in her room only a moment before she walked out on the porch. She wore the black coat over a black dress, white stockings, and low-heeled black shoes. Hey there, Elu, she called. Hey, Miss Eloise called back. She really stretched it out. Hey! Ain't been waiting too long, I hope, my aunt said. Just getting here, Miss Eloise said. Be sure you shut them doors if you leave from here, my aunt said to me. She was already halfway down the steps when she said it. She had not looked at me. Years ago, she had quit looking at me when she was on her way to church. When I came back from the university, I told her that I didn't believe anymore, and I didn't want her to try forcing it on me. If she did, I told her, then I would have to look for some other place to live. She didn't want me to leave, so she let me alone. Only occasionally, when she had some other church member at the house, would she bring it up. Even then, she wouldn't press it too far. She and Miss Eloise started up the quarter, one tall and slim, the other short and much heavier. They stopped in front of Miss Emma's house, and I heard my aunt calling her. Emma? Hey there, Emma. Miss Emma came out of the house, and the three of them continued on up to the church together. I went back inside. I had started correcting papers a couple of hours earlier, but I hadn't done very much. On Sunday, my aunt began getting ready for church as soon as she woke up, which was around 6 o'clock. Until 11 o'clock, there was nothing I could do but listen to her singing her termination song. Determination Sunday was the third Sunday of each month, when members of the church would stand and sing their favorite hymns and tell the congregation where they were determined to spend eternity. My aunt started warming up at 6 in the morning, whether it was Termination Sunday or not, and didn't quit until 11, when she walked out of the house. So I would be forced to put away the work until after she had gone, or I would go for a walk through the quarter and back into the field. I sat at my table trying to correct papers, but my mind kept drifting back to Friday. It had been dark when I returned to the quarter from Bayonne. It was colder, too. I could see sparks of fire rising out of chimneys. When I stopped in front of Miss Emma's house, Farrell Giroux, who lived across the road, told me she had gone to my aunt's house. I said good night to him and went down the quarter. I recognized Reverend Ambrose's car parked before the door. Now I felt a little guilty for getting back so late. The three of them were in the kitchen drinking coffee. Reverend Ambrose, Miss Emma, and my aunt. They were quiet, sitting in semi-darkness. The only light in the kitchen came from the open door of the stove. No one looked around when I came in, and Reverend Ambrose and Miss Emma barely answered when I spoke their names. My aunt was completely silent. I went to the icebox and took out the pitcher of water, and while I poured a glassful, I looked at the three of them at the table. They were quiet, not even drinking their coffee now. "I'll be in my room," I said to my aunt. "That's all you got to say?" She snapped at me. "I spoke, Tant Lou. You know what I'm talking about." "He was all right," I said. "That's all?" my aunt said. "Or did you forget to go?" "I went, and he was all right," I said. "You got more than that to say, Mr. Man," my aunt said. "Folks been sitting here hours waiting for you. I see you recovered from your cold, Miss Emma. I'm glad it wasn't too—" "Sit down," my aunt said. I went around the table and pulled out the fourth chair. "He was all right," I said. My aunt looked at me. Reverend Ambrose and Miss Emma stared out into the yard. "That's not what she want to hear," my aunt said. "How he was when you got there, how he was when you left. He was all right both times," I said. "You know what I'm talking about," my aunt said. She looked at me the way an inquisitor must have glared at his poor victims. The only reason she didn't put me on the rack was that she didn't have one. "We both ate some of the food, and we talked," I said. All this time Miss Emma had been gazing into the yard. Now she looked at me. No, toward me. Her thoughts were far distant. "He ate?" "Some," I said. "Y'all talked?" Her mind was still far away. "A little," I said. Now her focus became closer, much closer. She was looking at me now. "What y'all talked about?" "Different things. I told him you didn't come to see him because you had a bad cold." She looked at me, waiting to hear his answer, but I couldn't think of another lie, so I shifted to something else. Then I asked him how he was getting along. He said he was all right. The deputy had already told me he was okay. Guidry was in the office today. He said that Jefferson was getting along fine, didn't cause any trouble. He is using that comb and brush I bought for him. And he was wearing one of my shirts, the khaki one. I think he's doing okay. Miss Emma and my aunt both studied me. Miss Emma wanted to believe what I was saying, but I could see she had doubts. My aunt still wanted to put me on the rack, and Reverend Ambrose continued to look out into the darkness. "What else y'all talked about?" my aunt said. "You left from here before 1:30. "I can't remember everything we talked about," I said. "We just talked." "More than 5 hours, and you can't remember nothing else?" "I was with him about an hour, then I went back of town. I have a girl back of town. I like to see her sometime." "And maybe that's where you spent all your time?" "If you don't think I went to the jail, you can always go up there and ask them." "I didn't ask for none of your uppity, mister." "I don't mean to be uppity," I told her. "I'm just telling you the truth. I spent an hour with him. I had a drumstick and a biscuit, and he had something. I can't remember exactly what it was. Then we talked. Then I left and went back of town. Exactly what I did." "Deep in you, what you think?" Reverend Ambrose suddenly turned from looking out into the darkness. "Deep in you." "About what, Reverend?" "Him. What's he thinking? What's he thinking deep in him? Deep in you, what you think?" "Who knows what somebody else is thinking? They say one thing, they may be thinking about something else. Who can tell?" "You the teacher," my aunt said, not so kindly. "Deep in you," Reverend Ambrose said. "Deep in you. You think he know. He done grasped the significance of what it's all about?" deep in you. The significance? The gravity. The gravity? Reverend Mose Ambrose was a short, very dark man whose face and bald head were always shining. He was the plantation church's pastor. He was not educated, hadn't gone to any theological school. He had heard the voice and started preaching. He was a simple, devoted believer. He christened babies, baptized youths, visited those who were ill, counseled those who had trouble, preached, and buried the dead. All these things could be simply accomplished, but when it came to a discussion with a teacher, though he had known that teacher since his birth, then suddenly things were not so simple. His soul, he said. I don't know anything about the soul, Reverend Ambrose. I baptized him, Reverend Ambrose said. He was 11 or 12 then, but like so many others, he didn't keep the faith either, like yourself. He stared at me as though I was one of the worst of sinners. Maybe I was. Backsliders were usually worse than those who had never been converted. At least that is what people like him tried to make you believe. Y'all talk about God? He asked me. No, sir. We didn't get around to that. Didn't get around to God? No, sir. He looked at me and nodded his head. If we didn't talk about God, then what else on earth was important enough to talk about to someone who was about to meet God? I figured that's where you come in, Reverend. There's enough room for both of us, I can tell you that. Me, Sister Emma, Sister Lou going up there Monday, he said. Anything I ought to take him? Food, I suppose. Maybe some clean clothes. I can't think of anything else. I was thinking more about the Bible, Reverend Ambrose said. That would be nice too, I said. Reverend Ambrose didn't have any more to say. He and my aunt continued to stare at me until I excused myself and left the table. Now, on Sunday, as I sat at the table, trying to do my work, I could hear them singing in the church. It seemed that I had listened to this singing and their praying every Sunday of my life. No, I had done more than just listened. I participated until my last year at the university. There was no one thing that changed my faith. I suppose it was a combination of many things, but mostly it was just plain studying. I did not have time for anything else. Many times I would not come home on weekends, and when I did, I found that I cared less and less about the church. Of course, it pained my aunt to see this change in me, and it saddened me to see the pain I was causing her. I thought many times about leaving, as Professor Antoine had advised me to do. My mother and father also told me that if I was not happy in Louisiana, I should come to California. After visiting them the summer following my junior year at the university, I came back, which pleased my aunt. But I had been running in place ever since, unable to accept what used to be my life, unable to leave it. I pushed away the papers and listened to the singing. Miss Eloise was singing her termination song, "Were You There When They Crucified My Lord?" You could hear that high, shrill voice all over the plantation. I had been hearing it all my life. All my life. After her, there would be someone else, then someone else. It would go on for 3 or 4 hours, and it was impossible to do anything but listen to it or leave. I thought I heard a car stop before the door, but I didn't leave the table. Then I thought I heard someone come onto the porch, and when I looked up, I saw her standing in the doorway. But I did not believe it was she, because she had never come here before. She wore a blue blazer and a maroon pleated skirt. A black patent leather purse hung from her right shoulder. I hope you don't mind. Only if I'm dreaming. She smiled and came into the room. Chapter 14. I finished all my work. I wanted to see you, Vivian said. I had already stood up. I moved around the table and kissed her. I couldn't have wished for anything more, but why today? I don't know, she said. I just missed you. I wanted to see you. Where are the children? Dora, she said. I hope I'm not keeping you from anything. Only from a boring afternoon. Vivian smiled and looked around the room. Not much to look at, I said, apologizing for the place. This had been my parents' room before they went to California during the war. There was a bed, a chifforobe, a washstand, a table, and a couple of chairs. All the furniture was old. On the mantelpiece were 3 pictures in 5x7 wood frames, one of Vivian and me, one of my mother, and one of my father. A photo collage of Frederick Douglass, Abraham Lincoln, and Booker T. Washington hung over the mantel. Several pictures from calendars over the past few years were tacked to the wall. The wallpaper had brown, red, and green squares, and in places it was torn from age. Vivian picked up the picture of my mother. "Mom," she said. "Yes." "Pretty." "About your complexion, very fair." She replaced the picture and took up my father's. "Dark and handsome," she said. "I suppose you can say that." "I don't know those other 2, she said, looking at our picture. She looked around the room. "I love it. Rustic." "It's rustic, all right. Probably the most rustic place you will ever visit." "Pastoral," she said. "That too," I said. "With the singing and praying up at the church, really pastoral." "I like it," she said. "Try staying here about a year." She had gone to the window, and she was looking across the vegetable garden toward the church up the quarter. I moved behind her and put my arms around her waist, and I could smell her perfume. She turned to me, and I brought my hands up to her face and held it a moment, while we looked at each other. Then I kissed her very tenderly, and when I looked at her again, I could see in her face that she loved me as much as I loved her. "Sorry, I don't have anything here to drink," I said. "Don't worry about that. Would you like something to eat? My aunt made a cake." "I had a good breakfast," Vivian said. "How about some coffee?" "Don't bother. It's already made." "Okay." We went through my aunt's room, which was even more rustic than mine, then into the kitchen. In the kitchen was a black 4-lid wood stove, a 5-foot-tall white icebox, a handmade table with 4 wood-bottomed chairs around it, a safe with screen doors for the dishes, a broom that had seen better days, an axe in the corner, and several black pots and aluminum pans hanging from nails on the wall. Very, very rustic. Vivian stood at the back door, looking across the yard toward the field, where some of the cane had been cut. The cane had not been hauled to the derrick yet, and it was lying across the rows. A little farther over, where another patch of cane was standing, tall and blue-green, you could see the leaves swaying softly from a breeze. After warming the coffee, I poured each of us a cupful. I cut 2 slices from the chocolate cake my aunt had in the safe. Then we sat down at the table facing the yard and the field. "It's really peaceful," Vivian said. "Sunday is the saddest day of the week. Not for those who have to work in the field. It has always been for me. You ought to find something to do on Sunday, like going to church." I didn't answer her. "I know you believe," she said. "You don't want to, but I know you do. The only thing I believe in is loving you." We finished our cake and coffee, and I put the cups and saucers in the pan of soap water on the window shelf. "We ought to wash them," Vivian said. "They're okay." "No," she said. "It's not fair to her. You wash, I'll dry." "It's going to be like that, huh?" "Uh-huh," she said. There was hot water in the kettle on the stove, and I poured some into the dishpan. Vivian had already taken down another pan from the wall, and I poured the rest of the hot water into it. She added cold water from the faucet by the icebox. I washed and rinsed the dishes, and she dried them and put them into the safe. It felt good doing this with her. "Is that enough?" I asked when we had finished. "Or do you want me to sweep out the kitchen and mop, too?" She looked down at the floor. "I don't think so," she said. "It looks pretty clean." We had been playing. Now I became serious. "How long can you stay?" "I have some time." "Would you like to go for a walk down the quarter?" She nodded. "But first, I must go back to your little girl's house." I nodded toward the toilet, which was set on the ditch near the cane field. She left the kitchen, and I went to my room and put on a warmer shirt. I also got my knife in case we wanted a piece of sugar cane. I was standing on the porch when she came in from the back. "Rustic enough out there for you?" "I've been in worse. I'm a country girl, remember." We left the house. Up at the church, Reverend Ambrose had just started his termination song, Amazing Grace. We went down the quarter. Most of the people who had not gone to church were indoors. Seldom was someone sitting out on the porch, and no one worked in the gardens or chopped wood in the yard. Horses and mules were grazing in the pastures beside and behind the houses, but that was about as much movement as you saw. Above, a low ashen sky loomed over the plantation, if not over the entire state of Louisiana. A swarm of blackbirds flew across the road and alighted in a pecan tree in one of the backyards to our left. The entire plantation was deadly quiet, except for the singing coming from the church up the quarter behind us. We crossed the railroad tracks and turned right. In front of us were 3 or 4 boxcars of sugarcane, waiting to be picked up by a train and taken to the mill. We could also see the weighing scales left of the full boxcars and the derrick that lifted the cane from wagons and trailers and swung it onto the boxcars. Left of the weighing scales and the derrick was the plantation cemetery, where my ancestors had been buried for the past century. The cemetery had lots of trees in it, pecans and oaks, and it was weedy too, and since there were so few gravestones, it was pretty hard to see many graves from the road. Just before we came up to the cemetery, we turned left on a road that would take us farther into the field. This was Vivian's first time back here, and I told her that my people had worked these fields ever since slavery, and many of them were buried in the cemetery behind us. I asked her if she wanted a piece of cane, and she said yes. I jumped over the ditch and crossed a couple of rows until I found a good stalk. Then I came back to where she was waiting for me. I cut off the first 2 joints and threw them away. They didn't look sweet enough. Then I peeled the 3rd joint and tasted it. It was good. I cut off a round and gave it to Vivian. She chewed it and let some of the juice run down her chin, the way a small child would do. The small child would not have been able to help it, but she could. I cut off a round for myself and chewed it. It was very soft, very sweet. We chewed cane and walked the road for at least 3/4 of a mile. Just before coming up to the gate that would lead into the swamp, I noticed a pecan tree to our right. I had picked pecans under that tree many times, and I suggested we go over there and see if we could find some. The tree stood at the headland of the cane field. We searched for pecans in the grass on the headland and down between the rows of cane. We found a couple of dozen big ones, big and soft-shelled, and I cracked them by squeezing 2 together. I gave Vivian 1/2, and I kept the other. We sat under the tree, and I cracked pecans for both of us. Suddenly, we were too quiet. "You want me here?" Vivian asked. I was not looking at her when she said it, and I could tell by her voice that she was not looking directly at me. "Yes," I said. She had been gazing down at the ground. Now she raised her eyes to me. "That's what I want too," she said. "I love you, Vivian," I said. "I want you to know that. I love you very much." "I hope you love me half as much as I love you." I left her for a while, and when I came back, I saw that she had moved farther down between the rows, where the cane would hide us better. She had taken off everything except her brassiere and slip. I took off everything except the heavy shirt, which I unbuttoned. Vivian raised her arms up and out to me as I lay down beside her. I lay on my side and touched her brown nipples with my finger. Then I leaned over and kissed each tenderly, and raised up and looked at her. She was smiling at me. I went back and passed my tongue over each, and I kissed each again and rubbed my chin over them. My beard must have been rough, because I could feel her drawing away some, but when I looked at her, she was smiling again. I smiled back at her. "I think something happened," she said. "What do you mean?" "I have a strange feeling." I looked at her, and I felt happy, but my face must have changed. "What is the matter?" she asked. Nothing. But you frowned. I'm happy. But you frowned when I said it. Maybe I was just thinking. I don't know if I want Paul to grow up here. Don't spoil it, she said. It's been too good. Don't spoil it. I'm sorry, sweetheart. And suppose it's Molly. No, it's Paul. It could be Molly. Molly Wiggins. I don't know if I like that name. You think it's a good name, Molly Wiggins? Sounds okay. Sounds kind of whorish to me. Molly Wiggins. Then let her decide. If she likes it, we'll keep it. If she doesn't, we'll call her Paulette. Paul and Paulette. That sounds good. Maybe I'll have twins. If not, we'll go till there is a Paulette. She may be first. Then we'll go till there is Paul, I said. You ought to put on something. You might catch cold. Not if you hold me close. Not if you put that shirt round both of us. I lay upon her, kissing her hair, her eyes, her nose, her mouth. Chapter 15. Vivian stood with her back to me while I brushed off her blazer and her skirt. A few small blades of yellow grass clung to her hair. I removed them and picked up her purse, and I could see how clean the ground was where we had lain, and I could see where she had dug her heels into the ground. We left the field and started for the main road to return to the quarter. It had become colder, and we walked faster than we had when we came out into the field. We start a Christmas program next week, Vivian said. It's about that time, huh? You're having a program, aren't you? I don't know. I hadn't given it much thought. You only have about a month. I guess I'll mention it to the children tomorrow. I'll see what they want. That stuff in Bayonne's been keeping me so busy, I've just about forgotten everything else. When are you going to see him again? I don't know. His Nanan, my aunt, and their pastor are going up there tomorrow. I'll probably go Friday. I don't know. You have any idea? She said, not looking at me directly. I thought I knew what she was talking about. It's up to the big boss in Baton Rouge, I said. Vivian was quiet. We crossed the railroad tracks and entered the quarter. People were leaving church and coming out into the road. You think your aunt has made it home? Vivian asked. She is usually the last one to leave. You want me to go before she gets home? I want you to stay. You think it'll be all right? She'll have to get used to it. I don't want to cause any trouble. There won't be any trouble, I said. We went over all that last Friday. What happened? She wanted to know what had kept me in Bayonne so long. I told her I had been with you. That's all. That's all? That's all. I want her to like me. She will when she gets to know you. I wish I could say the same for them in Free La Cove. Vivian had met and married a dark-skinned boy while attending Xavier University in New Orleans. She had not told her people about the wedding because she knew that they would be opposed to it. After she and the boy were married, she took him back to Free La Cove. Everything turned out just as she had feared. Her family had nothing to say to her husband and hardly anything to say to her. He never went back. When her first child was born, she took the baby to visit. No one held the child or gave it a present or any attention. That was 3 years ago, and she had not been home since, not even when the second child was born, nor when she separated from her husband. One of her sisters visited her sometimes, and occasionally a male cousin would see her in Bayonne. Her mother and aunts wrote letters. There was no other communication. Vivian and I stood on the porch and watched my aunt, Miss Emma, Miss Eloise, and Inez come down the quarter. I saw my aunt looking at Vivian's little blue Chevrolet parked in front of the house, then looking toward the house. The women around her went on talking, but she was much more concerned with Vivian and me than with their conversation. They stopped before the house, and I saw Miss Eloise talking to my aunt. I am sure she was asking her whether they should come in or not. My aunt said yes, because they all proceeded into the yard, walking Indian file, my aunt in front. I introduced her to Vivian as soon as she came up the steps. "Miss," my aunt said, and gave a slight nod. She didn't look at me. I introduced Vivian to the other women. "Howdy do," Miss Eloise said. "How you?" Miss Emma said. "Glad to know you," Inez said. But they were not glad to know her. They didn't feel comfortable at all. They were at my aunt's house, and they were not about to show much more enthusiasm than she had shown. They went inside in single file. You could smell their sweet powder all over the place. "You think I ought to go?" Vivian said. "No. Come on inside." We had to pass through my aunt's room to go back into the kitchen. Tant Lou and the other women had taken off their hats and coats and laid them, along with their pocketbooks, on the bed. They were in the kitchen sitting at the table. My aunt had brought them here for coffee and cake. "I'll have to make some more coffee," I said. "I'll make my own coffee," my aunt said. "I'll make it," I said. "Not here." Vivian and I drank the coffee, and I'll make more. That's all there is to it. "You gonna walk over me?" she asked. "No, ma'am. I'm going around you," I said, "but I'm going to make the coffee." I filled the kettle with water and set it on the stove. My aunt was watching me. Her friends, sitting at the table, were quiet. "Grant," Vivian said, "I think just to be quiet." "You taking over my house?" my aunt said. "No, ma'am," I said, "but we drank the coffee, and this is the woman I'm going to marry one day, so you might as well start getting along right now." The women at the table did not look at us and were afraid to look at one another. My aunt was like a boulder in the road, unmovable, so I had to go around her. She could see that I was not going to change my mind, and she had three choices. She could stop me physically, she could leave the room, or she could sit down at the table with her friends. She was afraid to approach me physically, because I might leave and not come back. If she left the kitchen, then her friends would leave. If she sat at the table, only her pride would be hurt. She thought that was best. "How was service today, Miss Eloise?" I asked. "Oh, fine." She said it so fast that it sounded like only one word. I grinned to myself. "You find anything funny in that, mister?" my aunt asked, looking at me again. "No, ma'am," I said. She stared at me long enough to let me know that it was not over between her and me, not yet. She turned to Vivian, not saying anything, just contemplating her. The other women were quiet, looking either down at the table or out the back door, but never at one another. "I hear you from Freela Cove," my aunt said to Vivian. "Yes, ma'am." "I hear they don't like dark-skinned people back there." "Some of them don't," Vivian said. "Not all of them?" my aunt questioned her. "No, ma'am." "How about your own folks?" "I don't visit back there," Vivian said. "You don't love your mama? You don't love your daddy?" "I love both of them," Vivian said, and looked at me. "But I have to live my own life." "You go to church?" "I'm Catholic." My aunt looked at Vivian and nodded her head, as if she was thinking, what else could you possibly be? "You went to church today?" "I went to 9 o'clock Mass," Vivian said. "You going next Sunday?" "Yes, ma'am." "Sunday after that?" "I hope so." "This one?" my aunt said, nodding toward me but still looking at Vivian. "He don't have a church. What y'all gonna do then?" "We'll work it out," Vivian said. "You gonna leave your church?" "I hope I don't have to," Vivian said. "But if I had to, then I suppose I would." "You leave your church and just become nothing?" "We'll work it out," Vivian said. My aunt nodded her head. "I hope you know what you're doing, young lady." "I think that water is hot," I said. I poured water over the fresh coffee grounds and watched the container fill up. And when the level went down, I poured in more water. Now the aroma of the coffee had taken over the lady's powder, Or maybe it was because I was closer to the coffee pot than I was to the table. "Get some dishes out of that safe," I said to Vivian. "Cups and saucers and 4 plates for cake." "Grant, just do what I said," I told her. She brought the 4 cups and saucers to the stove on a tray, and I poured hot water into one of the cups. Vivian rinsed out all the other cups and poured the water into the dishpan on the window shelf. She set the tray of cups on the shelf and went back to the safe and began to cut slices of cake and put them on the plates. By the time she had finished, enough coffee had dripped and I was pouring it into the cups. Vivian put a fork on each plate and placed cake before the women. They said thanks, but they said it quietly. Vivian came back to the window for the coffee. Everyone said thanks again. "Thank you, ma'am," my aunt said politely. My aunt knew how to make you feel that she was of a lower caste and you were being too kind to her. That was the picture she presented, but not nearly how she felt. Vivian and I went out onto the porch. "I'm glad to get out of there," Vivian said. "She's pulled that jazz on others," I said. "It's not going to work this time, though." "Well, I see that mine are not the only ones," Vivian said. "It's not the same thing," I said. "Far from being the same thing." Vivian became very quiet. Then, "Well, I better be going." "Something?" I said. "No, it's getting late, that's all. I have to get my purse and tell them goodbye." She went back inside, and she must have stood a good distance away from the table, because I could hear them clearly from the porch. "I come to say I'm leaving," Vivian said. "It was good meeting you all." There was silence a while. Then I heard my aunt saying, "You a lady of quality. Quality ain't cheap." "Thank you, ma'am." "Don't give up God," my aunt said. "No matter what. Don't ever do that." "Yes, ma'am." "You're a lady of quality," my aunt repeated. "And a pretty young lady, too," Miss Eloise said. "That's for sure," Inez chipped in. "A pretty young lady, good manners. Quality is what you have. Quality." They were quiet again. Maybe they didn't have any more to say. Vivian came back outside and we went out to the car. "Well, what do you think of the place?" I asked her. "Still think it's pastoral?" "It is pastoral," she said, looking around. One of the Washington boys and a Herbert girl came from up the quarter holding hands. They had just left church, the boy wearing a black suit, a white shirt, and a tie. The girl wore a light blue coat over her dress. Both of them spoke to me at the same time, saying, "How you, Mr. Wiggins?" And they nodded to Vivian as they went by us, still holding hands. Good luck, I thought to myself. Vivian was watching them too as they continued down the quarter. "I'm glad I met your aunt and your friends," she said. "They'll have a lot to talk about," I said. "You think I did okay?" "With all that quality, how could you fail?" Vivian smiled without opening her mouth. I kissed her on the tip of her nose. She said. "Not in public. I have too much quality for that." Chapter 16. I was walking around the schoolyard with my ruler when I saw my aunt, Reverend Ambrose, and Miss Emma come back down the corridor after seeing Jefferson. The car stopped in front of Miss Emma's house, and the 3 of them got out and went into the yard. Reverend Ambrose looked over his shoulder toward the church, but the picket fence kept him from seeing me. After they had gone inside the house, I continued around the schoolyard, slapping my leg with the ruler. It was 2:45, nearly time to dismiss the children for the day. I re-entered the church through the front door. Irene Cole and another girl and a boy stood at one of the blackboards. We had discussed our Christmas program, and now they were writing down names of the students who would bring the Christmas tree, as well as those who would decorate it. I went to my desk and tapped my ruler for attention. "It's about time to go home. Any questions before we dismiss?" "Irene?" "No, sir," she said from the blackboard. "Marshall and Clarence and Alec are getting the tree. Shirley, Odessa, and I will see that it's decorated. Mr. Joseph's got some lint cotton in his crib, and we can get some crepe paper for Miss Eloise. She said she had a lot left over from making the Mardi Gras hats. What about the tree, Clarence? Guess we'll just go back in the pasture and get one like we did last year, he grinned. Do you think you might be able to find a little pine tree this time? We'll try, he said, and laughed to himself. The year before, the boys had brought in a small oak tree. They had dragged it through the mud all the way from the pasture, and by the time it got to the school, it had lost many of its leaves. The girls who were to decorate the tree had to wash it clean before putting on the lint cotton and crepe paper. It turned out to be a beautiful Christmas tree. One other thing before we dismiss class. I want you all to remember one person during this Christmas season. I'm sure I don't have to remind you who I'm thinking about. If there are no other questions, you may collect your things and leave. And I don't want to hear any noise out there in the corridor. Class dismissed. After they had gone, I sat down at the table looking over the test I had given the 6th graders in geography. The assignment was to draw a map of Louisiana and write in the names of the parishes and their appropriate places. After about 5 minutes, I heard footsteps entering the church, then saw that one of the boys had stopped halfway down the aisle. I knew what he was going to tell me. Miss Emma say on your way home, stop by. I nodded my head, and he left, walking slowly until he got to the door. Then he burst out running. I gathered up all my papers, and after closing and locking the back door, I went out through the front. Miss Emma's house was only a short distance down the corridor. They were sitting at the kitchen table drinking coffee when I came in. Some coffee? Miss Emma asked me. No, ma'am. Thomas said you wanted to see me. Sit down, Grant, she said. I could tell by the way she said it, and by the silence of my aunt and Reverend Ambrose, that things had not gone well at the jail. I pulled out a chair and sat down, facing Miss Emma. My aunt and Reverend Ambrose sat opposite each other. You didn't tell me the truth the other day, did you? Miss Emma said. I don't know what you're talking about, Miss Emma. When you come back from seeing him. Sure, I told you the truth, I said. No. She shook her head, pressing her lips tight as she looked across the table at me. He didn't like the food. He didn't ask about me. He did last Friday. No, she said, and shook her head again. 'Cause I had to hit him today. She stared at me, her lips pressed tight, and she lowered her head. Reverend Ambrose reached out and touched one of her arms as he said, Sister Emma, Sister Emma. My aunt put her hand on the other arm and looked at me. A couple of days later, Miss Eloise came up to the house, and from my room, I could hear my aunt telling her what had happened. Jefferson was asleep, or pretended to be asleep when they got to the cell. The deputy rattled the big keys against the bars and called Jefferson's name before opening the door. After they had gone inside, the deputy locked the door and told him that he would be back within the hour. They could call if they wanted to leave earlier. Jefferson lay on the bunk with his back to them, and there was no place for them to sit. Miss Emma managed to get a small place to sit by pushing him gently closer to the wall. She passed her hand over his head and his shoulder while she whispered his name. Ain't you gonna speak to me? She said. Ain't you gonna speak to your company? Finally, he turned, looking in their direction. He wasn't seeing them, my aunt told Miss Eloise. He acted as though they were not even in the room. His eyes were a total blank, my aunt said. Just blank. Blank was how she said it. I brought you some food, Miss Emma told him. I bought you a shirt, too, a pretty shirt. You want to see it? She took a polo shirt from the paper bag and spread it out with both hands. But he showed no sign of seeing the shirt or even of hearing Miss Emma. Reverend Ambrose went up to the bunk and said to him, Young man, I pray for you every night, and I know the Lord is hearing my prayers. Put all your faith in him, and he'll bring you through. That touched something in him. He looked up at the Reverend, and for a moment it seemed that he would say something cruel, mean, my aunt said. She said that standing back, looking at him, she could see his hate for Reverend Ambrose. Miss Emma put the shirt back into the bag and opened the basket with the food. "Come on, eat something for me," she said. "I brought all the best things you like." "You brought corn?" his voice said. "Not him," my aunt said, "just the voice. He didn't show a thing in his face. His eyes were blank. Blank," my aunt said. "Corn?" Miss Emma asked. He didn't answer her. "Roast niers?" He looked at her, but he didn't answer, and his eyes were just blank. "Blank, blank," my aunt said. He could have been looking at the wall or the floor for all the recognition he showed her. "This ain't roast nier season, Jefferson," Miss Emma told him. "That's in the spring. This November. Roast nier is all over now." He didn't look at her with hate, as he had the Reverend, but there was no pity either, my aunt said. He didn't show any feeling at all. "Corn for a hog," he said. "Corn for a hog? A hog, Jefferson? You ain't no hog, Jefferson. You ain't no hog." "Throw something," he said. "I'll never throw you nothing, Jefferson," Miss Emma said. "You throw a bone to a dog, slop to a hog. You ain't no hog." "That's all I'm is," he said. He turned away from her. "I didn't ask to be born." "Jefferson," Miss Emma said. "Jefferson." He wouldn't answer her, and she used all her great bulk to pull him over. "You ain't no hog, you hear me? You ain't no hog." "That's all I'm is," he said. "Fattening up to—" She slapped him. Then she fell upon him and cried, my aunt told Miss Eloise. My aunt and Reverend Ambrose went to the bunk and tried to pull her away, but she was still slumped over him when the deputy came back to let them go. At her kitchen table now, as I sat there, Miss Emma looked at my aunt. "What I done, Lou?" she asked. "What I done? What I done my master to deserve this?" My aunt saw that she was going to cry, and she stood up and put her arm around her shoulders. "Emma," she said, "Emma, the Lord is merciful. What I done?" She was shaking her head and crying now. "What I done, my master?" "Have patience," my aunt said, patting her on the shoulder. "The Lord is merciful." "What I done, she cried, "to make my master hate me so?" "The Lord don't hate you, Sister Emma," Reverend Ambrose said, touching her on the arm. "The Lord is with you this moment. He is only testing you." Miss Emma looked up at me. The tears were still rolling down her face. "Go back," she said. "Why, Miss Emma?" "'Cause somebody gonna do something for me 'fore I die." "Why me?" "'Cause you the teacher," my aunt said. I got up from the table. "And where you think you going?" Taint Lou asked me. "I don't know," I said, "but I'll go crazy if I stay here, that's for sure." "You going back up there, Grant?" "What for?" I said. "What for, Taint Lou? He treated me the same way he treated her. He wants me to feel guilty, just as he wants her to feel guilty. Well, I'm not feeling guilty, Tant Lou. I didn't put him there. I do everything I know how to do to keep people like him from going there. He's not going to make me feel guilty." "You going back," she said. "You ain't gonna run away from this, Grant." "Tant Lou," I said. I wanted to take her face in my hands. I wanted to hold her gently, because anger and screaming were not working. Maybe gentleness would work better. Maybe feeling my hands on her face would make her understand what I was trying to say to her. But as I moved toward her, I could see in her eyes that nothing I said was going to change anything. I left them at the table and went back home to my room. Chapter 17. Between Monday, when I talked to Miss Emma, and Friday, when I visited Jefferson again, something had happened inside me, and I wasn't so angry anymore. Maybe it was the Christmas season and the children rehearsing their parts for the play. Or maybe it was just me. I could never stay angry long over anything, but I could never believe in anything either, for very long. At the jail, I had to go through the usual search. Then, while the young deputy and I walked down the corridor to the cell block, I thought I would feel him out. Of the three of them at the jail, I figured he was the most likely to be honest with me. He was near my age, and he seemed better educated than the chief deputy or the sheriff. And I had heard from people in the corridor who knew his people that he had come from pretty good stock. "How's he doing?" I asked. "He's doing all right," the deputy said. "Does he ever eat the food we bring him?" "Some of it," the deputy said. "He leaves a lot of it, and we give it to the other prisoners, like she said. We've all eaten some of it. Good food, too." "How do the other prisoners treat him?" I asked. "They're just curious, that's all, but they don't bother him." "Do they ever talk to you about it?" "The execution? Yes. Sometimes they ask me things. I tell them I don't know a thing about it. I've never seen an execution." "Does he ever bring it up?" "No. I'm sure he doesn't want to even think about it." "He must think about it," I said. "He must, because I know I do. I've seen myself walking to that chair more than once. I've woken up at night sweating." "How do you take it? That's the question." "I suppose every man wonders about death sometimes in his life." We came up to the landing just before the big door to the cell block. The deputy stopped and looked at me. "Listen," he said. "We might as well call each other by our names. You're Grant, aren't you?" "Grant Wiggins," I said. "Paul Bonin," he said. We shook hands. "Listen," he said. "I'm not going to get too close to him, okay?" "Sure." "I've been warned. You don't get too close to somebody going to be executed. Be decent, treat him right, but that's all. This can get messy before it's over, and I will do my duty." "I feel the same way," I said. We looked at each other a moment, then we continued to the cell block. "What's a day like?" I asked Paul. "He eats a hot meal a day and a sandwich. Lots of beans, cabbage, potatoes, rice, you know. Sometimes the sandwich is the first meal. 10 in the morning, 4 in the evening. He can come out once a week and spend an hour in the day room. Walk, sit-ups, run, anything he wants. Most times he walks or just sits there at the table. Once a week he gets a shower. We have another prisoner give him a haircut. He's had one since he's been here. The barber can shave him, but you can see his face doesn't need shaving. That's about it." "He talk at all to the other prisoners?" I asked. "I never hear him." The deputy opened the heavy steel door to the cell block. Well, if it ain't Mr. Rockefeller," one of the prisoners said. He wore the green coveralls given to all the prisoners who did not have their own clothes. He also wore a red knit cap, his own. "Mr. Rockefeller always leave you chicken and biscuits," he went on, "but no bread for the cigarettes." "Just cool it, Henry Martin," the deputy said. "You won't get chicken or biscuits either, you keep that up." "I hope you brought some play rings," another prisoner said. "Anything," another one said. "This jailhouse food enough to kill a man." "Then don't eat it," Paul said to him. "What? And starve to death? The prisoner laughed. We came down to the last cell, Jefferson's cell, and Paul let me inside. "See you in a while," he said, as he locked the door. Jefferson sat on the bunk, slumped forward a little, his big hands clasped together down between his legs. He was looking through the barred window toward the sycamore tree, where several blackbirds were perched on a limb. "How's it going?" I said to him. He nodded his head, but he didn't turn to look at me. "I brought you some food." "I ain't hungry." "Well, you might get hungry later," I said, and set the large paper bag of food on the end of the bunk. "I was speaking to Paul, the deputy. He told me you always share with the other prisoners. If they want it, they can have it." I looked at his back, then I went by him and stood under the window facing him. He was still gazing upward, and I noticed his eyes, large and inflamed. Since my last visit, he had gotten a very close haircut, which exposed the structure of his almost triangular head. "Jefferson, we have to talk," I said. He continued looking above my head toward the barred window. When your Nannin came back from seeing you the other day, she broke down crying. Everybody cry, he said. I cry. Is that what you want? Her to come home crying every time she sees you? He didn't answer. You can keep her from crying, I said. You can make it easier for her. You can do her that favor. He continued to look above my head toward the barred window. She wants somebody to do something for her before she dies. That's for I die, he said, lowering his eyes to look at me. He repeated it. That's for I die. Is it asking too much, Jefferson, to show some concern for her? 'Cause I'm gonna die anyhow? That's what you trying to say? Now it was I who didn't answer. That's what you trying to say, Mr. Teacher? He asked. We're all going to die, Jefferson. Tomorrow, Mr. Teacher? That's when you gonna die? Next week? I don't know when I'm going to die, Jefferson. Maybe tomorrow, maybe next week, maybe today. That's why I'm trying to live as well as I can every day and not hurt people. Especially people who love me. People who have done so much for me. People who have sacrificed for me. I don't want to hurt those people. I want to help those people as much as I can. You can talk like that. You know you're going to walk out of here in an hour. I bet you wouldn't be talking like that if you knowed you was going to stay in here. In here or out of here, Jefferson, what does it benefit you to hurt someone who loves you, who has done so much for you? I never asked to be born. Neither did I said. But here I am, and I am trying to make the best of it. Like coming here vexing me? He asked. Am I vexing you, Jefferson? He grunted. Just keep on vexing me, he said. I bet you I say something about that old yellow woman you go with. You speaking of Vivian? Just keep on vexing me, he said. If you're talking about Vivian, it's Vivian who keeps me coming here. Keep on vexing me, he said. See what I won't say. Just keep on vexing me. Go on, say anything you want to say, Jefferson. Keep on vexing me. Bet you I'll scream, he said. So Guidry would come up here and tell me to get out? Is that it? Is that it, Jefferson? I had been trying my best not to become angry again, but nothing I said made a difference. He just sat there grinning at me. Go on and scream, Jefferson. Go on and scream for Guidry if that's what you want. We looked at each other, and I could see in those big reddened eyes that he was not going to scream. He was full of anger, and who could blame him? But he was no fool. He needed me, and he wanted me here, if only to insult me. Oh, pussy ain't no good, he said. My heart suddenly started pumping too fast. I made a fist of my right hand. If he had been standing, I would have hit him. If he had been any place else, I would have made him get up and I would have hit him. I would have hit any other man for saying that. But I recognized his grin for what it was, the expression of the most heart-rending pain I had ever seen on anyone's face. I rubbed my fist with my left hand, and gradually I began to relax. That lady you spoke of, boy, cares a lot about you, I said to him. She's waiting at that school right now for me to bring her news about you. That's a lady you spoke of, boy. That's a lady. Because it's she who keeps me coming here. Not your Nannin, not my aunt. Vivian. If I didn't have Vivian, I wouldn't be in this damn hole. Because I know damn well I'm not doing any good for you or for any of the others. Do you hear what I'm saying to you? Do you? I saw that grin slowly fade as he lowered his eyes toward the floor. When he looked up again, I saw tears in those big reddened eyes. Manners is for the living, he said. He looked at me a while. Then he swung around and knocked the bag of food off the bunk. The bag burst open on the floor, and there was fried chicken and biscuits and baked sweet potatoes all over the place. Food for the living, too, he said. When the deputy came back to let me out, I had picked up all the food and put it back into the torn paper bag, and I had placed the bag on the small steel shelf by the wash bowl. Jefferson and I had not exchanged a word for 15 minutes. He had lain down on the bunk facing the wall. I heard Paul coming down the block, speaking to the prisoners, calling them by their first names, threatening this one with hard work, praising another one for being good. He looked at Jefferson as he let me out of the cell. Jefferson lay with his back toward us. "How did it go?" he asked. "Okay." We went down the cell block, and the prisoners asked me what I had brought Jefferson to eat. I didn't answer. Just before we reached a heavy metal door, Henry Martin yelled out to me, "Goodbye, Mr. Rockefeller. I'll be here when you come back." "That's for sure," Paul said to him. He opened the steel door, and we went out. "Sheriff wants to see you in his office," Paul said. "Is something the matter?" The deputy shrugged his shoulders. "He just told me that he wanted to see you before you left." The sheriff was talking on the telephone when Paul and I came into his office. The chief deputy was talking to the fat man whom I had seen at Pichot's house. The sheriff sat back in his chair, his cowboy boots propped on his desk. He was talking to someone at the state prison in Angola. The chief deputy and the fat man were talking about fishing at Old River. They continued their conversation for another 5 or 10 minutes as if I weren't there. Paul stood beside me a while, then he went into another office. I stood waiting. The sheriff hung up the telephone and looked at me over the tips of his boots. "Well, Professor, making any headway?" he asked. "I don't know," I said. "You've been seeing him a month. You still don't know if you're making any headway?" "No, sir." The chief deputy and the fat man had quit talking, and they were looking at me too. "You wouldn't be trying to hide something now, would you?" the sheriff asked me. "No, sir." "Glad to hear that," he said. "Hear that, Frank? He ain't hiding nothing." The fat man grunted and looked at me. Guidry drew his boots from the top of the desk and dropped his feet heavily to the floor. "Women," he said, "always coming up with something new. Now they want all y'all to meet in the bullpen, picnic-like." He looked at me as though I was supposed to know what he was talking about. "Well, what do you think?" he asked me when I didn't offer an answer. "That's up to you, Sheriff," I said. "Yes, I know that," he said. "But the things they come up with. They want to meet him in the day room or another comfortable room. Comfortable room, where they can all sit down, 'cause they can't all sit down in that cell. You ever heard of anything like that before?" "I don't know what you're talking about, Sheriff," I said. "Don't you, Professor?" "No, sir, I don't." He regarded me a while, and so did the chief deputy and the fat man. The deputy was looking very mean. "You don't know they came up to my wife?" the sheriff asked me. "I don't know a thing that you're talking about, Sheriff." "They came up to the house and said they couldn't sit down, and could she, please, ma'am, speak to me about arranging a place so they can sit down. And you don't know anything about that?" "No, sir, I don't." "You playing with me, Professor?" the sheriff asked. "Sheriff, I just don't know what you're talking about." I would learn later. Miss Emma, my aunt, and Reverend Ambrose had visited the sheriff's wife a day after they had last seen Jefferson. The sheriff's wife greeted them graciously and set a precedent by having them sit in the living room while her maid served them coffee. They talked about little things before they came to their purpose in coming there. The sheriff's wife was stunned. She nearly spilled her coffee. What was wrong with the cell? Wasn't it big enough? Yes, but they couldn't all sit down. Was it necessary that they all sit down at the same time? Couldn't they take turns? She was sure that Reverend Ambrose didn't mind standing, and maybe Jefferson could stand up too, and let Taint Lou and Miss Emma sit down. It was then that Miss Emma reminded the sheriff's wife of all the things she had done for the family over the years. The sheriff's wife was suddenly taken with a splitting headache. She wondered where the maid had gone to, but she didn't call for her. She frowned and rubbed her temples. She told Miss Emma that she would see what she could do. "But don't count on it," she said. "The sheriff makes up his own mind in these matters." "Just speak to him if you don't mind," Miss Emma said. "I done a lot for you and your family over all these years." "Oh, Lord, do I know?" the sheriff's wife said. "Do I know? Do I know? Do I know?" I'll speak to the sheriff. Lord, I'll be glad when all this is over." Miss Emma dropped her coffee cup on the floor and started calling on God. "I didn't mean it that way," the sheriff's wife said. "God in heaven knows I didn't mean it that way. Lou, Reverend Ambrose, can't y'all do something? The Lord knows I didn't mean it that way." "Women," the sheriff said to me, "always coming up with something new." He looked at his deputy. "Well, Clark, what do you think?" Clark's gray eyes looked like marbles in his big face. "Let him stay where he's at." "My sentiments exactly," the sheriff said. "But if we put him in handcuffs and leg chains—" "I wouldn't even bother," Clark said. "I wouldn't either," the sheriff said. "But you got these women." "He ain't here for no picnic," Clark said. "He killed Mr. Gropay. Let him stay right there in that last cell till that last day." "What you say, Frank?" the sheriff asked the fat man. The fat man shrugged his shoulders. "I'm just standing here." "I'll go to him, and I'll leave it up to him," the sheriff said to me. "If he wants to come in the day room in shackles, all right. If he wants to stay in his cell unshackled, all right. But cell or day room, if I notice any aggravation, I stop all visits. You see, I know you haven't done a thing yet. Boys on the block tell me you haven't done a thing, and I doubt you ever will." I didn't answer him, but I was thinking, "Sheriff, you don't know how right you are." "You take her this message," the sheriff said. "He can meet her in the day room if he wants, but he will be shackled. Every moment of the rest of his life, he's going to know he's in jail, and he's going to be here till the end. This ain't no school, and it ain't no picnic ground. All right?" "Yes, sir." "Good. I'll see you later, Professor." Chapter 18. As he had promised, the sheriff went to Jefferson and asked him if he would like to meet his visitors in the day room instead of his cell. The sheriff explained that he would be shackled hand and feet there. He also told Jefferson that it was entirely up to him and that his wishes would be carried out. "If that's what they want," Jefferson said. "No, not what they want, what you want." "If that's what they want," Jefferson repeated. "Is it yes, then?" "If that's what they want," Jefferson said. "I'm going to die anyhow." When Miss Emma and my aunt and Reverend Ambrose went to the courthouse, they were led to the day room by the young deputy, Paul. The large room contained 3 tables made of steel, with benches attached on either side also of steel. There were no other visitors in the day room, and Miss Emma selected the center table. Paul told them that he would be back in a few minutes. While he was gone, Miss Emma took out the food and placed it on the table. She set places for 4, 2 on either side of the table. My aunt and Reverend Ambrose stood back, watching her. My aunt would say later that Miss Emma went about setting the table the same way she would have done at home, humming her termination song to herself. "This gonna be his place, and this gonna be my place," she said. My aunt said that Miss Emma, still humming to herself, passed her hand over the table to make sure there was no dust, no specks there, just as she would do at home. "That's your place there, Lou, and that's yours right there, Reverend Ambrose," she said. "Don't it look nice? Ain't this much better?" My aunt and Reverend Ambrose agreed that it looked nice and that it was much better than the cell. Then they heard the chains, and a moment later, the door at the far end of the room opened, and Jefferson came in, followed by the deputy. Jefferson had not been chained before, and he took long steps that caused him to trip, my aunt said. He came to the table like somebody half blind, and he didn't sit down until Paul told him to do so. Paul told him that he had to stay in that one place until he was returned to his cell. "He ain't gonna move," Miss Emma said. "I'm gonna see to that." "I thank you kindly." "You understand, don't you, Jefferson?" Paul said. "I hear you," Jefferson said. "He gonna mind," Miss Emma said. "I'm gonna see to that." "Y'all have a good dinner," Paul said, and left. "He come from good stock," Miss Emma said. "Y'all sit down." "Well, Jefferson, how you feeling?" He did not answer her. He sat with bowed head, his cuffed hands down between his knees under the table. My aunt and Reverend Ambrose sat down. Miss Emma dished up the food. Mustard greens with pieces of pork fat mixed in it. There was stewed beef meat, rice, and biscuits. A little cake for dessert, my aunt said. "You gonna eat for me, Jefferson?" Miss Emma asked him. He kept his head bowed, his shackled hands under the table, and he did not answer her. "You'll eat if I feed you?" she asked. When he did not answer her, she dished up a small piece of meat and some mustard greens on the spoon and held it up to his mouth. He would not open his mouth. Miss Emma looked at my aunt, and my aunt, who had been trying to eat, could see all the hurt in her face. When I came up there a couple of days later, the chief deputy told me I could meet Jefferson in his cell or in the day room. I told him it didn't matter to me where we met. The chief deputy told me it didn't matter to him either, but he told Paul to take me to the day room. I sat at the center table, just as Miss Emma and my aunt and Reverend Ambrose had 2 days before, and I heard the chains out along the cell block before I saw anyone. Then they came in, Jefferson in front, shackled, walking with short steps, his head bowed and his shoulders stooped. They came up to the table, and Paul told him to sit down. He sat without looking at me, his shoulders hanging low and closer together than they should be. "I'll be back," Paul said. "Can we walk?" I asked him. "He had his exercise," Paul said. "I'll have to ask Clark." "No, that's all right," I said. "Maybe next time." Paul left. "How's it going?" I said. "All right," Jefferson said without raising his head. "You want to eat something?" "I ain't hungry," he said. "Yes, you are," I said. "I know I am." There was store-bought bread, fried pork chops, and baked sweet potatoes. I put some of it in front of him and some in front of me. I started eating. "Come on, eat something," I said. He raised his head slowly and studied me a while. He had lost some weight. What had been a round, smooth face when he first came here was beginning to show some bone structure. His eyes were still bloodshot. I had seen them many times in my sleep the past month. "What you want?" he asked me. I was eating. I shrugged my shoulders. "Just want you to eat something, that's all." "What you want?" he asked again. His expression hadn't changed, and there was no change of inflection in his voice. His reddened eyes accused me of wanting something without saying it. "Us to talk," I said. "'Bout what?" "I don't know," I said. "Anything you want to talk about." "What do you want to talk about?" "That chair," he said. He watched me now, because he knew he had caught me off guard. I looked at him a moment, then I started eating again. That chair was the last thing I wanted to talk about. "We're starting our Christmas program," I said, but I could see that he was thinking about other things. "You remember those Christmas programs when you were in school?" "It's Christmas?" he asked. But he was not thinking about Christmas. He was thinking about something else, and he knew that I knew he was thinking about something else. "No, Christmas is still a few weeks off," I said, "but we're getting ready." "That's when he was born, or that's when he died?" he asked. "Who?" I said. He looked at me, knowing that I knew who he was talking about. "Born," I said. "That's right," he said. "Easter when they nailed him to the cross, and he never said a mumbling word." I had not finished eating, but I knew I couldn't eat any more. I put the rest of the pork chop and the slice of light bread on the napkin before me. "Jefferson, do you know what moral means?" I asked him. He looked at me, knowing that I knew what he was thinking about. "Obligation?" I said. "Do you know what obligation means?" He didn't answer, but he kept looking at me. "No matter how bad off we are," I said, "we still owe something. You owe something, Jefferson. Not to me. Surely not to that sheriff out there, but to your godmother. You must show her some understanding, some kind of love." That's for humans, he said. I ain't no human. Then why do you speak, Jefferson? I said. Human beings are the only creatures on earth who can talk. Why do you talk and wear clothes? Why do you wear clothes? You trying to get me wool gathered? He said. I'm not trying to confuse you, Jefferson. She loves you, and I want you to give her something that she can be proud of. Hogs don't give nothing. Hogs don't leave nothing, he said. Jefferson, do you like coming out here or you prefer staying in the cell? Anything y'all want, he said. Don't matter to me. It matters to her, Jefferson. Out here she can sit down. He grunted. I'm the one gonna have to sit down. You can be kinder to her, Jefferson. Every time she comes up here, she comes back to the quarter looking worse and worse. She ought to stay home, he said. All she'd do is worry more if she didn't see you. Hogs don't worry. Hogs just know, he said. Hogs don't know anything, Jefferson, I said. Only human beings know. Only human beings worry. This hog know. Fattening up for Christmas. Kill him at Christmas time, he said. Nobody is going to die at Christmas, I said. How you know? They told you? Nobody told me anything, I said. I just know. Nothing is going to happen at Christmas. I'll be glad when it's over, he said. Old Hog get him some rest then. Do you want me to leave, Jefferson? Leave when you want. Old Hog don't care. He lowered his head. The chains jangled under the table. I wanted to leave, but it was too early. The sheriff would have had his proof that I hadn't reached Jefferson, that I was giving up. They found a pine tree this year, I said. A nice little pine tree. His head was bowed. He didn't answer. His hair had begun to grow back, but you could still see the big bones of his skull. A half-hour later, Paul came in to return him to his cell. Jefferson walked in short steps, his head bowed, his arms hanging low, his shoulders too close together. After locking him in, Paul came back to the day room, and he and I walked down to the main floor together. What do you think? He asked. I don't know. But that's what she wants. Paul nodded. He understood. He had come from good stock. I went back of town to the Rainbow and had a couple of beers. When I figured Vivian would be out of class, I drove over to the school. One of the teachers was directing the children onto the bus, and Vivian and another teacher stood by the flagpole talking. Vivian saw me and came over and got into the car. Hi, she said, and kissed me. A drink or a sandwich? I said. A drink's not too bad, she said. I pulled away from behind the bus where the teachers were still commanding the children, and we went back to the Rainbow. The place was quiet and dark, and we sat at a table far over in the corner. The teachers who were already there knew that we wanted to be alone. The waitress hadn't come in yet, so Claiborne brought us our drinks. After he left, Vivian looked across the table at me. I don't think we ought to go to Baton Rouge tonight, I said. Vivian drank and set her glass back down and looked at me, waiting for me to go on. We had talked about going to Baton Rouge that night, but she knew I had seen him today, and we had been noticing that after my visits with him, things did not always go well for us in bed. How's the program going? I asked her. All right, she said, waiting. Mine's about the same, I said. The children found a nice little pine tree this year. Before it was oak or anything else they could find. But this year, a little pine tree. Not very tall, but nice. Nice and round. Vivian nodded. She was looking at me closely. I love you more and more, I said. If you just say the word, God knows I'd drop everything. And hate each other for the rest of our lives, Grant? No, she said. I could never hate you. Ever. You could, and you would, she said. No, I said. Yes, Grant. You would hate me for letting you make this decision, or I would hate you for doing it." "I'm not doing any good up there, Vivian," I said. "Nothing is changing." "Something is," she said. Chapter 19. It was cold, and it rained for 2 weeks preceding our Christmas program. It rained too much for the people to go out into the field to cut cane, and the field and the roads were too muddy for the cane to be brought to the derrick for loading, and then shipment to the mill for grinding. People stayed at home around the fireplace or near the stove in the kitchen. You could see gray-blue smoke rising from the big chimneys in the fronts of the houses and from the smaller chimneys in the backs. And because the wind always came into the quarter from the river this time of year, you could see the smoke drifting from the quarter back across the field toward the cemetery and the swamp. The only time you were likely to see someone out in the yard was to cut more wood to throw onto the fireplace or to put into the kitchen stove. The rest of the time, the quarter was deserted, the doors and windows shut tight against the cold wind and the rain. There was still a light drizzle on the night of the program, but it did not keep the people away. I had told the students that this program should be dedicated to Jefferson, and they had taken the message home, and many people who had never attended a Christmas or graduation program came to the church that night. The program began at 7 o'clock, but people were there much earlier. Because of the rain, they could not drive cars in the quarter, so they either walked or came by wagon. Reverend Ambrose, who lived up the river and not on the plantation, parked his car along the highway and walked to the church. As usual, he was dressed in a dark suit, white shirt, and dark tie, but tonight he also wore a yellow slicker. Most of the other people wore their going-to-town clothes, not their everyday working clothes, and not their Sunday best either. Going-to-town clothes were old clothes, but without any visible patches. The shirts and dresses may have been faded, but they were clean and they were neat. No one lingered outside, as they would have had the weather been better. After scraping off their shoes on the bottom step, they kicked the mud on the ground and came inside the church. The women folks who had brought food set their pots or pans or bowls on the tables that we had placed against the blackboards in the back. Mrs. Sarah James, who had arrived at 6:30, sat guarding the food until after the program, when everyone would eat. The other women took vacant seats as close to the heater as they could get. The men and the older boys stood in the back, talking until the women folks told them to sit down. I was behind the curtain with the students who had been chosen to participate in the Christmas play. The curtain was made up of 4 bed sheets, suspended from a wire that extended from one side of the church to the other. 3 of the sheets were very white. The 4th was a light gray. This one belonged to Miss Rita Lawrence, and as long back as I could remember, she had insisted on contributing something to the Christmas program, and every time it was a sheet, probably the same one, and it was never as white as the others. The audience always knew which sheet was Miss Rita's, and they thought it was embarrassing to have it hanging up there with all the others. But no one had the courage to speak to Miss Rita about it, and each year it was one of the 4 that made up the curtain. Irene Cole and Odessa Freeman were assisting me in preparing the students behind the curtain. The 2 shepherds wore brown croaker sacks over their dress clothes, and each of them carried a tall bamboo cane curved at the top and tied with black thread. The 3 wise men wore crepe paper robes. The robes were red, green, and yellow. Irene and Odessa continued to remind the wise men to be careful not to tear their robes by moving around so much. Mary, the mother of Jesus, wore a wrinkled blue denim dress to show that she was a poor woman. Joseph, her husband, had on overalls and carried a hammer in the loop of his pants. Baby Jesus was a white alabaster doll dressed in a long white gown. The girls in the choir wore white dresses, the boys white shirts. Every so often, I would part the curtain to see how many people had come in. Miss Rita Lawrence and her big grandson, Boke, were 2 of the first people there and sat up front, with Boke taking up almost a third of the bench. Twice, Boke had been sent to the mental institution at Jackson, but the doctors there knew he was not dangerous and felt they could do no more for him than Miss Rita probably could do for him at home, and after keeping him a week or 2, they sent him back to her. Boke had one peculiarity other than being unable to look after himself, and that was his love for marbles. He carried them with him all the time. He sat there now, playing with the marbles in the right pocket of his overalls. Miss Rita occasionally had to touch him on the hand to keep them quiet. On the bench with Boke and Miss Rita sat Julia Lavania, who had 2 children in the program, the boy as one of the shepherds, and the girl as Mary, mother of Jesus. James, her husband, was not there. A short, big-headed mulatto with curly black hair and gray eyes. He had told me once that he had better things to do than go to a coon gathering. But Julia was there, and I knew that she had brought pecan and coconut pralines, just as she did every year. The Freemans had come in too. Joe Freeman sat far in the back, but his wife, Harriet, and her mother, Aunt Agnes, and several of the children were up front, directly behind Miss Rita, Boke, and Julia Lavania. The Coles, Irene's people, sat behind them. Norman and his wife, Sarah, Sarah's mother, Lelia Wells, Sarah's sister, Esther, and Esther's boyfriend, Henry, and 2 or 3 children. Sarah usually brought crackling and baked sweet potatoes to the Christmas program. On the other side of the aisle, in the front row, and still wearing their overcoats because they were far from the heater, sat my aunt and Miss Emma, Miss Eloise Bowie, and Inez. Behind them were Farrell Giroux and his little wife, Ophelia. Ophelia was a delicate mulatto woman whose sisters came to the plantation every Sunday morning to take her to the Catholic church in Bayonne. She would return late in the evening, and we would hardly see her again until the next Sunday, when she would climb into the back of the car to go to Mass. I supposed it was her husband, Farrell, who got her out tonight, because she had never come before. Behind them sat most of the Martin family, about 10 of them. Most, but not all. The father, Herbert, was not there, and neither was the idiot boy, Jesse, or the pregnant daughter, Vera, or the old grandmother. But Viola, the mother, was there, along with 8 or 9 of her children. 2 others were in the choir behind the curtain. The Williamses were there, 4 of them. 3 Ruffins, mother, son, and daughter, were there. The Griffins, Harry and Lena, with their 2 grown-up unmarried daughters, Alberta and Luberta, were there. So the church was nearly full, and it was only 6:45. The bad weather had not kept them away, but probably had brought them out tonight. Since they could not work in the field or in their gardens, they had no reason to stay at home, claiming to be tired. At 7 o'clock, I parted the curtains and stepped out to face the audience. I told them how happy the children and I were to see them all here tonight, and that I knew they would enjoy the program because their children had worked so hard the past weeks to make it a success. I invited Reverend Ambrose, who sat in one of the side pews, to lead us in prayer. He stood and asked all to stand and bow their heads. The Lord's Prayer was first. Then he thanked God for letting us see a brand new day and for allowing us to gather together in his house in such inclement weather. The minister was a small man and seemed timid, but he did possess a strong, demanding voice when he prayed. He asked God to go with all the sick and afflicted, both at home and in the hospitals across this land. He asked God to visit the jail cells all over the land, and especially in Bayonne, and to go with the guilty and the innocent. He asked God to go with all those here tonight who did not know him in the pardon of their sins and thought they did not need him, no matter how educated a man was. He meant me, though he didn't call my name. He, too, was locked in a cold, dark cell of ignorance if he did not know God in the pardon of his sins. He closed by beseeching God to look down upon this humble little church and bless this gathering. The people responded with amen and sat back down. My aunt said amen louder than anyone, and she was looking directly at me. I went behind the curtain, and taking one of the middle sheets, while a student did the same on the other side, pulled the curtain back to reveal the stage. The choir of 12 boys and girls moved down below the altar to sing Silent Night. Irene Cole directed them. I stood behind the gathered curtain on the right, so that I could watch both the choir and the audience. The children had worked hard, and they sang beautifully, and this too was due to the bad weather. At any other time, they would have had to go home to work in the field or around the house. But since the weather had been so inclement, to use one of Reverend Ambrose's words, they had had more time for practice. The audience appreciated the singing. Even those who did not respond with "Amen, amen" gave the choir their closest attention. So did Boak. Once he raised his hand to point, a sign to show how affected he was by the singing, but Miss Rita took the hand gently and brought it to his knee. She kept her hand on his, not pressing it, but comforting him. After Silent Night, the choir sang "O Little Town of Bethlehem," and my eyes left the audience, and I looked at the little pine tree stuck in the tub of dirt, decorated with strips of red and green crepe paper and bits of lint cotton and streamers of tinsel and a little white cardboard star on its highest branch. And under the tree and propped against the tub was one lone gift, wrapped in red paper and tied with a green ribbon and with a red and green bow. The children had contributed nickels, dimes, quarters, money they had made from picking pecans, and Irene Odessa and Odell James had gone to Baton Rouge and bought a wool sweater and a pair of wool socks. The people sitting up front could see the package, and they knew who it was for, and at times I could see their eyes shifting from the choir toward the tree, and I could see the change in their expressions. But Jingle Bells, a gayer and livelier song than the previous two, brought everyone's attention back to the choir, and I could catch in people's faces relief from their thoughts. Odessa Freeman's "'Twas the Night Before Christmas" followed, and it was more than a simple recitation. It was a dramatic performance. In her long white dress with long sleeves, and with her black hair, recently straightened and shining, combed back and tied with a white silk ribbon, and her body swaying, and her arms spread out one moment, then closed so that the palms of her hands came together, and her voice rising to fill the church, then falling to a whisper that you could barely hear. Odessa not only made you see the room where the stockings were hung, but enabled you to hear the reindeer on the roof and hear Santa before you saw him come down the chimney to fill the stockings. You heard him call the name of each reindeer after ascending the chimney, and you actually watched the reindeer going to the next house in the quarter. It was so real that Boak felt it too and pointed again, and Miss Rita nodded that she understood his feeling, and she drew back the hand and placed it on his knee and kept her own hand on his to comfort him. Following the poem came an essay, "The Little Pine Tree," written and read by Albert H. Martin III. He told of all the other Christmas trees over the years, of oak, of cypress, of strange bushes that could not be named. He told of how the trees had been cut in the pasture and dragged back to the quarter, and how the girls had washed the leaves to make the tree presentable. Then he came to the little pine tree. Not a great tree. It was not tall, not blessed with great limbs, but it was pine, and it was the most beautiful of all the Christmas trees. The little pine tree even took on a character of its own. It was so happy to be here. While he spoke, Albert Martin III gestured toward the tree, and everybody looked at the tree and at the single gift underneath it. "Hark, the herald angels sing" came next, and led into the nativity scene. As the song ended, two shepherds in their croaker sack robes came on stage behind the choir. The shepherds were attending their flock, when suddenly a light appeared on the back wall under the pictures of Christ and Reverend Ambrose. The light came from a flashlight held by a student from stage right. Shepherd 1, pointing, "A star in the east." Shepherd 2, "And so bright." Shepherd 1, "What does it mean?" Shepherd 2, "Wish I knowed." Shepherd 1 looked at Shepherd 2 as if he were about to correct his grammar, but changed his mind. No one in the audience seemed to have noticed. 3 wise men entered from stage right, dressed in red, green, and yellow robes of crepe paper. Several people in the audience snickered and made comments. Shepherd 1, "Wise men, they can tell us." Shepherd 2, "Tell us, O wise men, what yon star mean." Wise man 1, "It shines down on Bethlehem." Wise man 2, "Little town of Bethlehem." Wise man 3, We must go to Bethlehem. They all look at the star. The star moved a little, as if the person holding the flashlight was getting tired. Shepherd 1. But what did it mean? Wise man 1. In time you will know. Shepherd 2. How we gonna know? Wise man 1. He'll let us know. Shepherd 1. God on high? Wise man 1. Works in mysterious way. The light moved again, as if the person was changing hands or giving the flashlight to someone else to hold. Wise man 2. Wonders to perform. Shepherd 2. But we ain't nothing but poor little old shepherds. Wise man 1. The lowest is highest in his eyes. Wise man 2. Let us be off. Wise man 3. To yon Bethlehem. The wise men leave stage right. Shepherd 1. Brightest star I ever seen. Shepherd 2. Got to mean something. The star dipped down and came back up. Shepherd 1 looked at the person holding the light and looked back at me to be sure I had seen it too. Shepherd 1. Let us kneel down. Nothing will bother the flock tonight. The shepherds kneel as the curtain closes. The curtain opens immediately afterward. We see Mary sitting on a bench holding baby Jesus. Joseph stands beside her, looking down upon the baby. A hammer hangs from Joseph's overall loop. Off stage right, people are heard approaching. First speaker. The star points yon. Second speaker. We close now. Third speaker. Yon, the stable. The three wise men enter from stage right and immediately kneel down before Mary and baby Jesus. Wise man 1. Surely, he come. Wise man 2. Nodding. Him all right. Wise man 3. Our Savior. All three. We bring thee gifts, O Lord. Each places a penny on the bench beside Mary. Mary, surprised. My little baby? Savior? Wise man 1, nodding. Your little baby. Mary, happy. My little baby. She holds him up to Joseph. Look, Joseph, my little baby. Savior. Joseph nods but does not speak. Mary, rocking baby Jesus in her arms, begins to sing, Joy to the world, the Lord is come. The wise men stand and join her, and so does Joseph and the shepherds, and the choir and all the others, including the boy who held the flashlight. As the song ends, they all bow to the audience. While the children remained on stage, I asked Reverend Ambrose if he had any last remarks. Again, he thanked God for allowing so many people to come out tonight. Again, he reminded us that we were not all saved from sin. Even with book learning, we were still fools if we did not have God in our hearts. Again, he asked God to go with those locked up in prison cells. He thanked God for all his blessings, and the congregation responded with, Amen, Amen, Amen. I thanked the minister and told the congregation that that was our program for this year, and I reminded them that there were refreshments in the back. The children waited on stage to hear what I thought of the program. I told them that it was fine, just fine. The children left the stage to get in line for food. Do you want me to bring you something, Mr. Wiggins? Irene asked me. No, thanks, I said. Something the matter, Mr. Wiggins? No. Why? I said. You don't look too happy. I'm okay, I said. Go on and get something to eat. Irene left to get in line, but she looked back at me over her shoulder. She was right. I was not happy. I had heard the same carols all my life, seen the same little play, with the same mistakes in grammar. The minister had offered the same prayer as always, Christmas or Sunday. The same people wore the same old clothes and sat in the same places. Next year it would be the same, and the year after that, the same again. Vivian said things were changing, but where were they changing? I looked back at the people around the tables, talking, eating, drinking their coffee and lemonade, but I was not with them. I stood alone. I saw one of the little Herbert girls coming up the aisle toward me, balancing a napkin of food on both her hands. She had to pass by the tree before reaching the pulpit. She watched the food all the time to be sure she did not drop anything. "Miss Luce bring you this." "Thanks, Gloria." I sat on a chair inside the pulpit, eating fried chicken and bread. The people were still laughing and talking. Just outside the pulpit was the little pine Christmas tree with its green and red strips of crepe paper for lights, its bits of lint cotton for snow, and the narrow strings of tinsel for icicles. And there was the lone gift against a tub of dirt.